We're gonna have Jen here?
Jen's not here today as well.
Okay. Okay. Oyez, oyez, oyez. We will call to order this year our Madre Planning Commission meeting of February 20th.
Chair Hutt,
Here.
Vice Chair Dennison. Here. Commissioners Catalano.
Here.
Dallas, Desai,
Here.
Hefner, and Spears.
All right, we have a quorum. Next, we will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved?
John, in the order that it's stated on the agenda sheet, you had a question about that a minute ago.
Yeah, I questioned whether we wanted to move that, but I guess there wasn't a lot of
Okay.
interest, so I'm fine with.
So Nathaniel Terrace will come before Santa Anita then?
That's correct, as a returning project.
Yep.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Just checking.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the February 6th meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections?
I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Okay. They look good to me. Motion?
Move they be accepted as presented.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds.
Second.
A third.
Third
All in
second.
favor? Aye. And we have one abstention as noted. Next, we'll move on to community input. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda, please come on down. Okay, seeing no one, we will move on to a presentation, which is part 2 of our legislative update on the 2020 legislative matters, including Senate Bill 330.
And we have a PowerPoint presentation.
All right.
All right, good evening, Commission. As Chair Hutt stated, today we're going over the second part of Senate Bill number 330. At the last meeting, we discussed the substantive amendments that restrict local development standards and the demolition of residences. Today we'll be talking about some of the procedural amendments to the housing development project applications. So there are two procedural statutes that have been amended. The first is the Permit Streamlining Act. So as you may know, the Permit Streamlining Act requires the city to compile a list of information needed from the applicant and requires the city to approve or disapprove a project within a certain time frame. The legislator adopted this, as you might know, so oftentimes applicants would submit an application and the city would just hold it and they wouldn't act on it for months. And under the Permit Streamlining Act, upon an application submission, the city must act within 30 days or the application is deemed complete and the application can move forward. That's the general, the basics of the Permit Streamlining Act.
Excuse me, do you mean act on the completeness of the application?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the second law that was amended under SB 330 was the Housing Accountability Act. The Housing Accountability Act prohibits the city from disapproving a housing development project for very low or moderate income households or an emergency shelter unless the city makes specified written findings. So what's notable about the Housing Accountability Act is that that applied to affordable development. It didn't apply to housing development just generally. So now we have, under the Permit Streamlining Act, any project is, so here's the definition of a development project under the Permit Streamlining Act. Any project undertaken for the purposes of development, including a project involving the issuance of a permit for construction or reconstruction. So you can see under that definition, that includes commercial, that includes residential, it includes all kinds of different permits. There are some exceptions to the Permit Streamlining Act. That includes legislative land use decisions, final subdivision maps, permits for ministerial projects like ADUs, for example, wouldn't be subject to the Permit Streamlining Act because that's ministerial approval, and administrative appeals. So if you file an appeal with the city over some kind of land use permit, that wouldn't be subject to the Permit Streamlining Act. Here's the new definition under SB 330 of this term called a housing development project, which is now also subject to the Permit Streamlining Act. It means a use consisting of any of the following: residential units only, mixed-use developments consisting of residential and non-residential uses with at least 2/3 of the square footage designated for residential use, transitional housing or supportive housing. So a housing development project can be any one of those three things. Our current interpretation of this is that this applies to single-family homes, because single-family home is a residential unit-only project. There is some disagreement, though, about this. The city of Los Angeles, for example, has recently published a implementation guideline that states that residential units only, they didn't really explain it, but they're interpreting residential units only to mean 2 or more units,
Because it's plural.
because it's plural. That's what I take it.
Fabulous.
We've posed this question to HCD. HCD has yet to respond. So the HCD has yet to respond. But so under this definition, right, a housing development project includes all kinds of different permit approvals, conditional use permits, design review permits, variances, hillside development permits, anything that falls under that definition of a housing development project, the Permit Streamlining Act requirements will now apply to. Also, it creates a 2-step application process. Before, we'd have our standard application process for just development projects. They would submit everything required on that application, and then we determine whether it's complete. Now, there's a preliminary application, and then there's your standard development application. So under this preliminary application, the state has provided an exclusive list of things we can request. We can't stray from that exclusive list. Under the preliminary, we can still request more than the development application. And then if that preliminary application is deemed complete, they're freezing all the zoning standards as to that date that the preliminary application was submitted. Why are they doing this? I guess, as we've discovered, some cities have, once an application was submitted and they didn't like the application, they would change their zoning to prohibit a project like that from going forward. And so by the time it gets to the hearing phase, that project dies because it can't meet the findings. So this prevents cities from doing that. And also, once you submit a preliminary application, it triggers the deadline to submit a development application, which I believe must be submitted. Let's see here. Oh, I'm going to get to the timeline later.
Yeah, Alex, I got a question about that. But what happens if it's a larger development that has that is going to need a specific plan, and they are asking for a zone change as part of that specific plan?
So all of that. So for the preliminary application, right, that portion of it, we can't request a specific plan in that. There's a set list of things that we can request, and all they need to do is submit those things on that list, and that part of the application is done. Do we request zone change information on a development application? Do we request that in development application?
We would if the application required that. So if
Right.
there was a development that maybe needed a specific plan that would require a general or land use map amendment or a zoning map amendment, I think we would include that
Yeah.
in the request.
But isn't that, you said before,
pre-development.
that's
But
one of the
then-
exceptions, right?
Yeah.
The legislative act.
So the Permit Streamlining Act.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, you're right.
So, we've had come before us master plans for certain educated, like Alverno and other places have said, okay, this is what we want to do in the future. Would that then freeze their ability to develop based on the zoning at that moment when they turn in the master plan? So a master plan would fulfill that?
Let me take a step back. I'm sorry, I got confused. That wasn't one of the exceptions, and I'll go back to the slides. I think what you're referring to maybe is the final subdivision map.
No, the legislative land use decisions.
Right.
So,
How does that fit in?
Right.
so if you need a zone change, that wouldn't fall into this.
Right.
You might, for instance, have some very, very underutilized commercial space downtown, near the edge of downtown, that
Right.
a developer would like to do housing
Right.
on, okay, or maybe 2/3 housing, 1/3 commercial, something like that. That's going to rightly require discretionary hearing. So how does that kind of thing fit in here?
So if it's like a general plan amendment, or if it's like a specific plan that they need to
It
adopt,
should rightly. should.
that would be part of the application, but that wouldn't be, Chair Hutt's correct, that likely wouldn't be subject to these requirements. Although that'd be part of the application, but that part of the application wouldn't be subject to these requirements. Does that make sense?
And then in that same vein, would we assume that design review permits and any kind of code variances would also fall into that legislative review so that they would be obviated from being part of
No,
that?
no.
No, there's a
wouldn't.
distinction between, we often talk about administrative versus discretionary, but those are all quasi-judicial. This is talking about legislative actions where you change the actual zoning.
Gotcha.
And so that's a different kind of beast altogether than a development application.
So is there not a variance to get the application through here in 30 days?
Well, if you need a zone change, that's not a variance.
Not a zone change, so I'm saying that if it's a second story,
Right.
is this new law saying that,
Variance is also subject to this.
Yeah, there's a permit, that would fall under the permit streamlining.
so?
But the 30 days is just the preliminary application, not the whole thing.
Right.
We're getting a little ahead
Okay.
of ourselves.
You asked a question, I'm sorry, could you ask it again?
So on occasion that this group sees master plans
Mm-hmm,
for institutions,
mm-hmm.
are we to assume then that does the master plan fulfill that obligation for holding the zoning for that area?
Well, I think it still apply, right? But the master plan would change then the zoning once it's adopted. Does that make sense? So like the zoning will be frozen at the time the preliminary application is submitted, right? But that doesn't affect the general plan amendment or the new specific plan we're gonna adopt, because once that's adopted, that'd go back and change it.
So I think what Bob's getting at is master plans are supposed to be updated every 5 years. So maybe 5 years ago was the last update, or is a new master plan? And does the zoning freeze? Do we apply the same zoning standards at the time the master plan was adopted?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But a specific plan would be different than that.
Specific
Yeah.
plan is different than master plan.
Yeah.
Master plan is institutional. It doesn't change the zoning.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So,
Yeah.
Or a
let me think about
specific
that one.
plan
Let me
could.
get
We
back to
have,
you.
we have people that object to the plans that certain institutions in town have, and
Yeah.
there's some pushback.
Yeah.
Alverno being one of them.
I haven't thought about that, and I want to give you a thoughtful response. So let me get back to you about that.
But what I was wondering if that master plan then acts as the preliminary notice that, this development we want to proceed with this development,
Yeah.
and does that mean that then the zoning for that area is frozen?
Yeah. I'll get back to you about that one.
Some guy that doesn't know anything.
Got me. Okay.
We've outlined a whole pile of fights here, haven't we?
every one of these bills is a pile of fights. A lawyer's.
It seems like it's
Team
designed
machine.
it seems like it's designed that if you decide to put up a fight, that you're gonna be in a lawsuit for sure, and then that's gonna preclude you from wanting to fight.
Yeah, it's, I think, sort of the idea.
So development application. So whatever is not included in the preliminary application, and we want to include, we include in our development application. So that, like I've noted there, it says a local list that includes some items added by the state. So there are some things that the state requires, but we can also add our own supplemental requests. And the submission of the development application triggers the deadline to submit an initial environmental study. So here's what the timeline looks like. Oops, sorry, this is not the timeline. Let me skip ahead here. Here's the timeline. So the applicant submits a preliminary application and has 180 days to submit the development application. assuming that the applicant submits a development application, the city has 30 days to review it. The city determines the application is incomplete and requests additional information. So it sends the application back to the applicant. The applicant now has 90 days to submit the requested information, or if they don't submit it within those 90 days, they have to resubmit from the very beginning, from the preliminary application. Assuming the applicant submits a revised preliminary and development application, the city again has another 30 days. So that 30 days clock restarts. And then the city, after that, within that 30-day period, has to determine whether that revised application is complete or not. And upon making its completion determination, has to determine whether that site is historic or not. That's a new addition to.
Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, though, because we've had issues where if you don't know the historic thing happens until the end, you can do a lot of planning that you'd have to sort of throw out at the end, so.
Why shouldn't you?
What?
Like, why does that come up so late, and why is it an issue? I don't understand why, if there's you are talking about a historic eligibility.
Whatever's on the list, right?
That should be known right up front,
exactly.
as soon
Yeah,
as a
exactly.
developer, back on step one,
Right.
considers a property.
Right.
Is there a limit to the number of cycles you can do this 30 and 90 day?
No.
So
Not that
you-
I'm aware of.
So the developer could submit an incomplete application, the city says you need X, Y, and Z, and then they could come and give X. And then they go, oh, now you still need Y and Z, and then they could just keep that clock going forever? I mean, because you still are, from the beginning, you've locked in the zoning, right? So you can effectively,
Well, yes, but are you saying like within the 90-day period, they provide you the supplemental document?
well,
I think
and I'm just saying,
On
if,
day 89.
let's say you're a developer who wants to keep the process going because the economy turned down and the city has changed its zoning to be less favorable, and you sort of
Yeah.
want to lock in that zoning until the next economic cycle comes up, you could just turn in crappy applications that you know are incomplete and just keep doing that same thing over again.
Well,
We've never
they're
had that.
only,
Why not?
you only lock in the zoning, right? You only lock in the zoning if the preliminary application is deemed complete. That additional request for information is for whatever you're missing on the general development application.
Right.
So assuming the preliminary application is deemed complete, then yes, you're right. But if the preliminary application is deemed incomplete, then no.
Well, I guess a lot of this turns on what goes in the preliminary application versus the development application.
Yeah, but then
We
you
can't
could also,
decide, right, you said that
The
that's,
state dictates
Right.
that.
you could also, in technical information, just do a very unsatisfactory job of submitting technical information.
Well, it's sort of-
Hydrology, seismic, whatever, right? And
Well-
that would keep it going after the preliminary was.
Assuming those are, I can't remember what's on the preliminary application right now, but assuming that's on the preliminary application, it'd be,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to decide whether
But that was a for instance.
Yeah, right,
Mhm.
possibly.
Okay.
The educator in me is fascinated by unfunded mandates.
Uh-huh.
And it would seem, is there a provision in this law that says that the city can charge, or is that limited? Because I can see a small city with limited resources being overwhelmed and missing the 30 days because they don't, they can't pay their people to be here 12 hours a day.
Yeah, there is no requirement in there, or there's no limitation on what we can charge, and I know we do charge for development applications, so yes, we should be able to recover the cost of this.
Cool, good.
So could we get a list of what the state requires in the preliminary application so we can understand
That'd
the
be good to
difference there?
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm bewildered that the point of this is to supposedly
Speed it up.
speed up housing and increase the housing production, and that doesn't seem speedy to me.
Well, it's a very short list, John.
Well, it's gotta
It's
be
not a
pretty
short list at
broad.
all.
It's gotta be pretty
Maybe
broad. It applies to every jurisdiction, right? I mean, that preliminary list is carte blanche for everyone. So
Alex?
it's gotta be not non-specific. It's,
yeah.
One last question. I was asking you before about making a historic site determination, wanting to know why they didn't know that up front. Is that really referring to a project like One Carter, where the issue first came up when the development proposal was made, and then it took a very, very long time to work through with exactly what the required elements would be?
So I believe, do you want to answer that one? Okay, I believe it does. There's an exception here for CEQA. So if during the CEQA process you uncover something that, so if you made a determination that it's not historic, then during the CEQA process you discover, oh, there are some kind of remains here, or it has some kind of cultural value, then there's an exception for that, and it can be, you can designate it historic going forward. But yeah, I think in the One Carter scenario, this would apply.
Okay, got it.
All right, let me go back one slide here. So we talked about the purpose, we talked about the effective date of the freeze, and it's limited to development. Does not apply to regulations of use or occupancy of residential units upon receipt of a certificate of occupancy. So does that make sense? If this only freezes the zoning standards as they apply to this development for purposes of construction, once you receive the certificate of occupancy and something's built, you can regulate it as you would regulate anything else that's built in the city.
And if you change the code, it's basically grandfathered non-conforming. If the city changes the code and they're already operating, then it's just grandfathered in.
Yeah, but not as to use, right? Because
No, but zoning.
if like we control, if there's something having to do with like hours of operation, and the city has to amend something, or let's say there's like some kind of nuisance, right? And the city declares something to be a nuisance. Well, whatever the city declared to be a nuisance would apply to this as well, despite what the former zoning was.
Okay.
It's operational as opposed to the construction.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, moving forward. There are exceptions. A fee, charge, or exaction. If a fee, charge, or exaction is increased automatically for inflation, that's not going to be subject to that freeze. So we can have a CPI adjuster in there. If a preponderance of the evidence indicates that the development would have a specific adverse impact on health or safety and there is no feasible alternative to mitigate, right? So that's kind of like if there are changed circumstances that justify, because we just discovered some kind of potential harm, it's covered under
Like
that.
you find an earthquake fault. Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A need to avoid or lessen an impact under CEQA through mitigation measures. The construction has not begun within 2.5 years following the final approvals. So that's punishing those developers who take advantage of this and aren't building anything. And a project revised to increase square footage or unit count by 20%. So if your project changes substantially, and by substantial I mean 20%, you're no longer protected.
But 19% is cool.
19%'s dandy.
What if you do 19 twice?
Each 30-day cycle, right?
Every 30-day cycle.
Okay, here's
We're all
a
gonna go
new
to law school
requirement
and learn this.
that's pretty significant.
Don't do it.
We have a new 5 hearing limit. So the city cannot conduct more than 5 hearings related to approving a housing development project that complies with objective general plan and zoning standards in effect when an application is deemed complete. This includes a public hearing, a workshop, or similar meetings conducted by the city. It includes hearings held by the city council, planning commission, or any other agency, board, commission, or committee thereof. And it includes continued hearings. This is for projects, obviously, that were deemed approved as of January 1st, 2020. And so there is now a 5 hearing limit. If by the 5th hearing, at the 5th hearing, we have to decide, is it approved or is it disapproved? So we either approve it or we deny it, but we have to make a determination at the 5th hearing.
And so by includes continued hearings, so if we hear it once and then continue it the next time,
That's 2.
that's 2. Okay, that's what I thought.
Right. This does not include, though, so, I mean, this might make sense for big projects. Sometimes developers have workshops for the community to let them know what they're planning on building. This doesn't include workshops led by developers, but it does include workshops led by the city. Okay, next slide. Exceptions to the 5 hearing limit. Let's see here. Hearings regarding legislative approvals required for the project.
And there's your zone change.
Hearings conducted by an applicant. Hearings conducted before an application is deemed complete. Developer's waiver or extension. Projects requesting a variance. So this is also the new timeline set up under the Permit Streamlining Act. Before, let's see here, it was, so the 180 days after certification of an EIR, that applies to just development projects generally. That hasn't changed. Before, there used to be a 120-day requirement after a certification of an EIR to approve a project. Now it's 90 days, and that only applies to a housing development project. So that second row there, that's changed.
So if you're gonna have 5 hearings, you gotta do them all in 90 days?
No. You can have the hearings. Oftentimes we have the hearings before we certify the EIR.
But they have, in
But if
any
the
event, it has to be concluded by that 90 days.
No, once the EIR is certified, then 90 days thereafter you have to make a determination. And so there are think of it as 2 parallel tracks. You have your 5 hearing track going, and you have your CEQA track going, and then once the CEQA is approved, then that 90-day will kick in. And they might meet at the same time, one might be before the other. That third row there, the requirement before was 90 days after certification of an EIR. Now it's 60 days, and that only applies to affordable housing development projects. Think of it that way. So number 2 is housing development projects. Number 3 is affordable housing development projects. And rows 4 and 5 haven't changed. Those remain the same. 60 days after adoption of a negative declaration, you need to act on a development project, and 60 days after an exemption from CEQA, you have to act on the development project. And so here's what that timeline looks like. So that if the city makes a determination regarding the completion of a project, and it makes that within 30 days, the city then has to do an initial study within 30 days after it makes that determination regarding completeness. The city approves or disapproves a development project within 60 days after CEQA exemption or negative declaration, or the city approves or disapproves an affordable housing project 60 days after an EIR certification, or the city approves or disapproves a housing development project 90 days after an EIR certification, or the city approves or disapproves a development project 180 days after an EIR certification. So it just really matters what the development project is. Depending on what the development project, whatever you're approving, that will change the number of days you have after a CEQA determination to approve the project or disapprove it.
And most of the things we look at are exempt, so they would be
Or
the second
single-family
bubble.
homes
Yeah.
now. Yeah, right. Really, this comes into effect when you have large,
Mhm.
multi-family structures. Right. And that's it for part 2.
Okay.
Coming soon are the new amendments to the density bonus law.
Part 3.
So the density bonus laws for affordable housing to allow more units.
Okay.
And that overrides, for us locally, Measure V, right, where we set a limit in the downtown area, then the number of units. All the state law stuff is above and beyond that.
I'm not familiar with Measure
Okay.
V.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Or is that enough for now?
Clear as mud.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. Next, we will move.
Actually, I do have a question. Are you Vince, was this the first time that you've seen this, or have you already started studying?
No, we've had discussions. We have a pre-development application already starting to be prepared, and so we've modified a number of things already.
I guess my question was more as to whether or not anything that you've seen with this new legislation gives you pause or gives you concern or heartburn. Choose your word.
I think just the fact that we have a pre-development application process and a second application process. I think that's elongating the process and making it more complicated
Yeah.
than necessary.
But you've got a handle on it, whatever it is,
Yes.
Okay.
we hope.
Next, we will go to our public hearings. Our first one is Hillside Development Permit 1520 and Conditional Use Permit 1521.
We have a PowerPoint presentation.
Excuse me, top of page 2, right under public hearing, it says disclosure of site visits and ex parte contracts.
It should say contacts. I might even change that to communication, ex parte communications.
Was this
Basically, it's a new disclosure we wanted to put in to our agenda and also in the commission packet, so that there's no confusion that there have been site visits that were conducted by, in many cases, by the commissioners, that we're not violating the Brown Act, and that there was no discussion amongst the commission with the applicant.
So what are we supposed to be doing with that right now?
If I could add also, one of the reasons we included this is because under due process, if we're going to be a quasi-adjudicatory body, which we are when we approve permits, under due process, the applicant is entitled to know what we base our decision on, and so it has to be in the record. And so if we do have site visits or we have contacts with the applicant and we gain information from them, we need to make sure it gets into the record if we're going to make a decision based on that information. And so that's another reason why we put that in there. It's really just good practice is what it
Right.
is. It's to make sure that when we do engage people, which it's okay to do, the planning commission has a right to go out and look at properties and talk to the applicant, that we get that information on the record.
So we want to do that in the discussion of each public hearing, right? Or do we want to do that as separate?
Yeah, what does it look like?
I would recommend we do it in the beginning, or as it is, I'd recommend just disclosing if we've had any site visits or ex parte contacts, and then we can go.
Okay, because I think that, typically many of us go to the sites, and I always try to say, well, I went to the site visit, but I think if we want to do this before we even do the hearings, I mean, I went to both sites. I haven't talked to either applicant other than in the meetings, but I did go to both sites.
I went to both sites and there was no one there at either one, so.
I did not go to either site.
I was at both sites. The only contact I had with the applicant was, it was a teenage boy who was there, and I asked him to put his dog in the house. All right, I walked in the backyard, and there was this big dog running
For
around.
the record, we need the dog's name.
I think for the record that wasn't the owner of the house, but the renter of the house. I went there and did have contact with the owner of the house, but just very minimal. Didn't discuss anything about the project with him.
Yeah, had no interaction with the applicant.
And of course, the other site on Nathaniel Terrace was just nobody to talk to. Just go look at it.
Right, it's a Trump around site. Okay, with that then, we will move to our first public hearing.
I'm sorry to interrupt with
No,
that, John.
no, thanks, that's good. I went right past that. I didn't even notice, so I'm glad we stopped and got that into the record.
So we have a PowerPoint presentation. So this is Lot 9. This is a continued meeting from the November 21st, 2019 meeting of the Planning Commission. So it's our second evaluation.
It's our second one, so we have 3 more.
The applicant is requesting to construct a 2-story, 3,932 square foot single-family residence with an attached 2-car garage on the property. And pursuant to the Hillside Management Zone, single-family dwellings requires approval of a Hillside development permit. The applicant is also requesting, or is also required to comply with the condition of approval number 159 of tract map 54016. Any development which can be seen from the location of the Macomber Cabin, Carter Barn, or the Willis Estate is subject to a conditional use permit. And a minor conditional use permit is also being requested to provide a 5-foot side yard setback on portions of the west building elevation in lieu of the required 7 feet 4-inch side yard setback requirement. A view of the site location map highlighted is Lot 9 in red. Views of the site looking northwest on Baldwin Court as you drive up the hill. And you can see the flat graded pad and the steep terrain that traverses up that hill is part of Lot 9. On Baldwin Court, looking towards Nathaniel Terrace. On Baldwin Court, looking towards Nathaniel Terrace, more westerly view. And a project summary. So the application is complying with the requirements specific to the Hillside Management Zone and the settlement agreement, specific to lot size, lot coverage, building height, gross floor area, and parking requirements. As I mentioned, the application is requesting a minor conditional use permit to provide a 5-foot side yard setback. And this is derived, which is part of the average lot width calculation. It's included in the packet as Exhibit A.11. The average width of the lot is 74.61 feet. And there's a 30% cumulative lot width calculation that is applied with a minimum of 10% of lot width on either side. In this case, the property is requesting a 5-foot side yard setback in lieu of the 7 feet 4 inches. The other issue here, this is a reverse corner lot, so both the street frontages have a 25-foot front yard setback. And it's only portions of the property, as we'll see, of the building that actually is encroaching into the 7 feet, 0.46 setback. Neighborhood analysis was conducted on the property, 500-foot radius. It excludes multifamily and vacant parcels. So some of the vacant parcels are not included in the Stonegate development site. So the neighboring home size, the mean neighboring home size is 2,375 square feet. The top 1/3, 3,554 square feet. The proposed development is 3,952 square feet, making it 398 square feet above the top 1/3. We included the size slide to give you an idea of what the prior design looked like. So this is just for reference. So the comments from the commission were fairly substantial and required really a complete redesign. So I'm not going to go back and forth as what was done before. The architect, however, is going to show some of the modifications to the footprint of the building and the design in comparison to the previous. So the project revisions, both by the Planning Commission and the architect's responses included in the staff report. And I'm going to let the architect show exactly what that response, where it was to each of the comments from the commission in their presentation. But the Planning Commission comments included to relocate the building mass toward the rear of the lot and follow natural grade, to relocate the building mass within the hillside by grading and or considering enlarging the basement, to enlarge the house with the street cornered or to achieve a more welcoming appearance, to consider revising the site plan. Also, there was a comment that the house lacks architectural identity, to address the portions of the stone entry portal and consider a different roof style or configuration. So these are the revised building elevations. As you can see, it's substantially been modified from the prior design. So the top or south elevation, some of the major changes includes a setback garage component, so there are 2 single-car garages. Massing of the front entry, starting as a single-story element. with a recessed entry door. And the rear elevation or north elevation is appearing again also as a single-story component. Elevations. East elevation, this is adjacent to Nathaniel Terrace. One of the comments from the commission was to make it more welcoming and one-story in appearance. And what's been incorporated here is a porched area with terrace. And this is the west elevation, and these are the two components that are projecting into that 7.46 foot side yard setback. This being just the entry into the garage, and this is the basement area and this a bedroom up above. Perspective illustrations. How the house fits into the terrain and how it's stepping up and complementing the slope of the site. This is a conceptual site plan. And one of the comments that the commission had before was to push the house even further up. So this is really not a flat pad. Those are just missing topo lines. They're pretty much category 4 slopes and above. So there was no opportunity to do that, but the applicant did push the building back further and realign the retaining wall as well. And I'll go into the floor plans in a minute. This is the conceptual landscape plan. Excuse me, there are a collection of oak trees on the property. Those are not being touched in any way. So this is the conceptual first floor plan. What was changed from before was a substantial reduction of the basement. So that's been reduced. Basically, we have the garage, a storage area, basement storage area. There's an entry here, foyer, and this is an internal atrium or courtyard. There's one bedroom and bathroom, and there's a parlor or office adjacent to that porched area. Go up the steps to the second level, which is a great room, dining room, kitchen, living room, and bedrooms and bathrooms, laundry room. There is also an elevator coming from the basement level or the first floor. And that was shown in the prior design as well. Conceptual roof plan has been substantially modified, and it's now consistent in terms of roof slope. It's been redesigned with a hip roof configuration, and all the flat roof components and the various planes, angles of the roof pitches have been modified and are more consistent. Section elevations through the property. This is the location of the courtyard, internal courtyard there. Color material board, which you can go ahead and pass around. And photo montage rendering, showing some of the other approved projects in the vicinity here. So the Stonegate Design Guidelines compliance, summary compliance, indicate that the house is a custom architectural design with references to the prairie style. The mass and bulk are reduced. The building is stepped back and building design to address the contours of the site. Fenestration is visually interesting. The project utilizes earth tone, a earth tone color palette, and the materials are durable and low maintenance. And the landscaping complements the house and the hillside setting. Summary findings for the hillside development permit are consistent with the general plan goals and policies. The proposed developments, setbacks, height, floor area, lot coverage, and parking comply with the standards for development. And the development is being constructed on a previously graded pad, so it minimizes the exposure to natural hazards and public open space areas. The design does not impact any ridgeline views and complies with the architectural and site design standards, both within the Hillside Management Zone and the Stonegate design guidelines. The summary for the conditional use permit findings: the project site is adequate in size and contrast with the existing historic features in the vicinity. The site has sufficient access to streets, which are adequate in width and pavement type. And the proposed use will not unreasonably interfere with the use of adjacent properties. There's a demonstrated need for the use requested because the development site was intended for the production of housing, and the proposed use is consistent with the general plan, zoning, and other applicable codes. The minor conditional use permit summary findings: proposed project will not be detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. The site is adequate in size, shape, and topography. The use will not unreasonably interfere with the adjacent property owners. Number 4 is very similar to the CUP statement that it's intended for residential development. And the project is compatible with the intended character of the surrounding area. The alternatives before the Planning Commission are to approve the Hillside Development Permit, Conditional Use Permit, and Minor Conditional Use Permit. You can approve with further modifications, deny the application identified in the findings that the Commission feels cannot be made, and the basis for rejecting those findings, or continue the project and provide staff and the applicant with further direction. The staff recommendation is to approve the application for the Hillside Development Permit, Conditional Use Permit, Minor Conditional Use Permit, subject to Resolution 20-02 and the conditions of approval. The applicant has a PowerPoint presentation. Do you want to continue with that one?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get that presentation unless anyone has any pressing questions.
Good evening, Chair Hutt, Commissioners. We're happy to be here again and go over what we've been working on Lot 9. As Vincent mentioned, I wanted to start with going over our responses to the comments we received at our previous meeting. The first one was really to start looking at moving the mass of the building towards the hillside, towards the back corner. So what we did, we actually, reading this comment and going through all the comments, we decided to really give this plan, kind of look through it with fresh eyes and give it see what opportunities we had in order to meet some of these comments. So what we did is, in looking at the plan, we looked at the possibility, first of all, to open up the plan. We created a central courtyard, which helped to minimize the mass of the building. And in doing so, we started to locate the one-story elements in the front, which face the corner of Baldwin and Nathaniel, and then start to build up and really locate the main mass of the house towards the back and side. We were also able to push it back slightly. In doing so, we did reduce the basement, and we were able to grow into really our hillside in the rear. Together with that, we were able to adjust the rear retaining walls on the upper level, allowing us to maximize the open space and rear yard of the site. As you can see from the rendering as well as from the side elevation, now the mass that is first seen as you look at approach the corner is the one-story mass, and it starts to build up. We have a midpoint mass that starts stepping up the slope, and then the secondary mass in the back, which starts to handle most of the mass of the house. The next comment was to be able to push the house further into the slope. I know in our previous meeting, we were looking at the site, and the way our topo lines, they did terminate at one point. Our survey did only go to that point, but as Vince mentioned, our site is, once we really go off the pad, it really just goes straight up. There's quite a lot of grade in the back. So we have pushed the house back a little. We have allowed the second story, which becomes a one-story on the upper level, to move in the back a bit, and then we were able to move the retaining walls enough to allow some usable backyard space, and as well as allowing the rear retaining walls to remain low. We don't want to create tall retaining walls, so that minimizes the impact. We did use 2 retaining walls to help step it up and allow some planting in between and soften the retaining walls there as well. The third item was to engage the house with the street. What we did, one of the main things was having this one-story element creates more of a pedestrian scale as you walk around, hopefully around this new community. And we also opened up the entry compared to our previous design. It is now a one-story element that is recessed into the mass. We have a nice stair and pathway that leads straight from Nathaniel up to the entry, creating a nice entry to the house. We also played, so we played with the site. We looked at, there's 2 utility areas. There is a sewer, I believe, here, and a mailbox here, community mailbox, with small retaining walls on each side. We did look at unifying that with one smaller wall that matches the house and becomes more of a secondary element. As it is right now, it's kind of an eyesore and breaks up the front yard. We also added this porch on the Baldwin Court side. It's a private court, but it does bring the porch into the setback and starts to engage the street. And also we've simplified the landscape and softened it and more naturalistic in the front, a more welcoming visual element as you walk or drive around this area. I think another part of engaging the street is we really looked at this 2-story mass. We did break the mass into 2 forms as well as the garage into 2 forms. So we were able to de-emphasize the large 16-foot garage door, broke it down into 2, pushed one back about, I think, 4.5 feet from the plane of the first one. Starts to soften up the elevation, allows a small roof form on that form to help break up, again, the overall composition and mass of the building. Let's see if I didn't skip, I did skip one. The fourth one was consider revising the site plan. As you can see with the comparison between a previous site and a revised site, we did simplify the landscape hardscape plan. As you can see, our garage is pushed back and broken into 2 forms. We did redirect the pathway into our front entry directly from Nathaniel as opposed to off the garage or driveway. We did eliminate a lot of the hardscape elements, especially at the corner, so now it becomes a really nice soft corner, more naturalistic. On the side as well, we had a lot more hardscape and lawn area. Now it's just more landscape area. Even in this area, we were able to minimize the retaining walls, so we just have 2 smaller retaining walls, and we're able to slope up to our rear yard for a more natural look, as opposed to before we had a series of retaining walls. And here you can see how we simplified the rear retaining walls to allow for additional, more usable rear yard as opposed to what we had before. On the side of the house, we did simplify that as well, and just have, we eliminated a lot of the hardscape that was shown previously. Item 5 was really to give the house some identity. What we had proposed before was basically a contemporary house, contemporary elevation. What we wanted to do, and we had talked about within the hearing about maybe looking at prairie. So with the idea of prairie, we thought, well, that's connected to California. So we looked at Irving Gill, in particular to the Teets Cottage in San Diego, and there were a few other houses he did in San Diego that has the prairie look. It's a little more California, it's a little more simplified. We have the stucco, we have the wood trim, we have the low hipped roofs. We have a banding around the house that helps to break up the 2-story masses and helps to draw the eye to the upper level. We have these interesting bay windows, which we've tried to bring into the architecture that we're proposing for the site. So we feel we've been able to draw upon that and use that to make the house have a distinct style. I think our entry now is more welcoming, more comfortable than I believe the previous design. And we've utilized different porch elements. We've kind of incorporated that into the porch we introduced. Here are some just more examples of the Teets Cottage, as well as some other variants of the Irving Gill style, which is a little cleaner. This is a little more modern version. But these as well follow along the same as the Teets Cottage. And I believe the final one is address the proportions of the stone entry portal. While this, again, we eliminated and redesigned the whole front. So now that entry is more welcoming, it's recessed. So I think that helps to resolve the concern you had on that item. And I think this is one. Lot 7, and here you see the big difference. This is where our courtyard really helped. Before, our roof was a little more complicated. We did have some flat areas. By introducing the courtyard in the center, we first and foremost did introduce an interesting entry into the house. As you come in, you do look into a nice courtyard, but it also allowed us to have this simple 1-story gabled form. As we build up, we have another gabled form, and then the main mass has now become a nice L-shaped, simple form with a few gable plugins. So it really simplified our roof, and I think it works well with the style of the architecture. I was going to walk through the plan, but I think Vince walked through it. I think the general understanding is we're coming into a nice foyer that opens up into the courtyard, and then you walk into the parlor or guest bedroom, as well as a service area for the garage and the elevator going up. Upstairs on the landing halfway, we do have the laundry, and then you reach to the second level, which utilizes the ability to have the rear yard, so we have our great room upstairs together with the 3 bedrooms. Again, I think these, you've seen, these are the elevations. The back's a little simpler. It still has the same detailing as in the front, and it continues all the way around. And just wanted to show these as well. We do have a SketchUp model of the site, which also has the existing approved houses, if you'd like to see that. It gives you an idea of what the site looks like. If you'd like to see that, we can jump over to the SketchUp model. Gee, it's great. So clear. That's our night view, actually. So this SketchUp model has the our approved houses on it, as well as just the massing models for some of the lots nearby that we were able to get. Those haven't been approved. So we did ghost them in lightly just to show that there's something potentially going in those sides. Oh, there we go. So that gives you an idea of approaching through Carter and how that would be seen with lot 25 on your right. The one right in front, I believe it's lot 1 potentially, not ours. And then you would have lot 24, and then you would come to lot 9. And you can see it in relation to the other approved lots. What this is also good is it shows you the hill behind lot 9. It really does just go straight up. It's really hard to build without major grading.
Yeah.
Can you show us the view from right over here? Lower more from like the building pad?
Where's the pad?
So here you can see the stepping up of the house. So it starts to follow the topography and breaks down the mass of the house.
Well, in considering that request to reduce that side yard setback to 5 feet, I think that it would be important, really, I wasn't trying to be funny a minute ago. I said, where's the pad? I don't see the pad, but where an adjacent, a house could be built on the adjacent property and where it can't, I think would have to be part of the consideration for whether we should approve that setback request. I don't have any sense of where you can and where you can't build next door to it.
I don't have the adjacent lot on with me showing the pad itself.
And I believe behind that wall, it does slope up, and then you have a graded flat pad.
So
Yeah,
it's
there's a
down in
grade
the
in
bowl,
between.
there's a bowl.
Yes, you could sort of see it there. Can you
pull back some? We can get sort of a bigger view.
So there does seem to be a berm that goes up towards our site.
If you look on the side monitors, they're a little brighter than this. I think.
Oh, yeah,
sort of-
look at-
You can see it better.
So in other words, it would appear here that, that is a buildable lot, right, to the,
Yes.
Yes, it is, but there's a slope in between.
you mean, it'll be a much higher
There's-
elevation.
There's a little slope right along the line.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm wondering whether that would relieve the issue of, you know,
Setback?
yeah, if that house next door to it needed to,
Be separated more?
was going to be up enough that it would kind of make it a non-issue that we were down.
Right, I think
setback.
the issue you're gonna have there is more that other house looming over this house as
Correct.
opposed to this one sort of impinging on that house.
Yeah, I can agree with that, although they bought this lot and wanted to build on it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Is lot
They
eight?
own-
one
they
of
have all
yours?
of them,
They-
so.
No.
They knew.
Can we see sort of a view from the intersection looking right at the house diagonally? I'm sorry, the intersection of Baldwin Court and Nathaniel Terrace, sort of yeah, that one. Yeah, and then just in a little, and then down a little there. Okay.
It turns the corner really well.
Any other views people want to see?
That retaining wall that's in this diagram, is that where it is on the real retaining wall that's there in the photo, the real-time photo?
Which one, this one here?
Yes, is that
The one on the side is existing,
Yes,
and then the two rear ones would be new.
right.
That, I believe, is a rock wall. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So the lower one is the one that's in the picture, and the one above it, you're gonna indent that back and go up.
This one here? Or,
Uh,
oh, this one will be changed?
yes.
Oh, that would be,
Okay.
That's your new wall.
that'll be our new walls.
And it's got a water feature?
There is an element that faces our morning room kitchen, so it becomes kind of an axial relationship to creating a vista.
Bear pond.
Can you pull back a lot so we can see sort of the whole village, the whole community? You've got the ones up, that one that's approved up on the hill, right?
Lot 7, correct.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the only other view I would like to see is if we're coming down Baldwin Court.
From the barn
looking-
coming down.
Yeah, and driving down the hill, what does the house look like?
Yeah, the house is really masked by the hill.
Retaining
Uh-huh.
And the retaining wall there on the right is the one that's there now with the stone?
Correct.
As opposed to that tan block.
Yeah.
And then your new addition, you have some additional retaining wall there.
It's gonna die into that.
Right, it'll die into it. The two smaller walls will die into it, and those will
Right.
just be finished the same as the house. Same
Okay.
stucco color.
Uh-huh. That's all fine.
So you're not proposing any kind of fencing, or is there an open, like, wrought iron fence or something on the yard?
Currently, we're not. I know in previous meetings, fences were seen as something that we shouldn't be looking at. So we have stayed away from the fencing. I think that, depending on what,
Drop off there between the street and the grass area in your yard. Looks short there, but on the,
there's some topo, there's some grade change.
bear won't have a problem with it.
We want to make it easy for them.
It is.
I like that, you just hold that, that's good.
Yeah, just leave that there. Okay, do we have any questions for the applicant or staff?
One question on the west side, that really, since you're pushing it all back into the hillside, you had some hardscape steps going up that way.
Right.
Is that just gonna be a drainage field, or how, because it's gonna need access, or are you planning to put some kind of porous stone to walkway, or, it looks like it's green landscaped in the picture. The far wall, the far west side, now that you're pushed back.
We're just utilizing the slope, excuse me. It's going to be graded, so it's a gradual slope. But we decided not to do a hardscape. Maybe they could do some pads if they want to use it. More access if it was going to be more active. We tried to minimize the pathways.
Okay, I mean, because it looks like a pathway it's just gonna be dirt, rains coming off of there, it's just gonna.
There is planting planned for that area.
Okay.
So let me double check.
Yeah, I saw the street level landscaping, that's okay. I mean, if that's the preference, I don't care, I was just looking for a porous walkway, I just thought like, it's such a skinny area, it just
Right.
lends itself to being able to get up there. If they wanna put greenery and never go over there, that's fine too, I guess.
I have a question. What, on the, like the bay pop outs, you have a couple of those, like on the front and the side. Are those a different material, or are they planned to be stucco?
Those will just be stucco. They are kind of a popped out base and
No, like the bay above the garage door
this right here.
and the other one on the side, are those a different material?
They are a hardy board.
Oh, they are, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, when Gil did that, I think they were all wood, just differentiated from the stucco.
Yeah, okay.
And it helps to break up the stucco and the mass, gives a little detail.
Is there a reason why you, for the side yard reduction and setback, you did a minor conditional use permit rather than doing the deviation, the modification of standards that's built into the Hillside ordinance? Or is that just, I mean, the findings are pretty similar. I was just wondering if there was a reason why we went one way or the other. Did we think we couldn't make it, or it's just?
No, I think staff just took the approach that the minor conditional use permit findings were a little bit more amenable to modifying the building setback than the hillside
Okay.
management zone.
I mean, I don't have heartburn either way, but I was just wondering. Okay, anybody else? Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the commission on this application while we have the public hearing open? Okay, we'll close the public hearing then and bring it back for deliberation. Who would like to start us off? Everybody wants to volunteer? Oh, good.
I think, for starters, I think it's a huge improvement from what you had the first go round. So I think, kudos to you for really listening to the comments and really conceptually figuring out a way to kind of like on this view have your lowest mass and try to march up that way towards the peak. So I think that was smart. And I think actually the most interesting thing is sort of using that or introducing that sort of void, that courtyard, as a fulcrum around which you were able to, before the house was all connected like a donut, and by introducing that you were able to like you said, drop the front part down, then have the second sort of mass and then sort of the L shape in the back. But that all is predicated on actually removing part of the house in the middle, which I think is really smart. I mean, sort of ingenious. And I like the fact that you have this sort of courtyard space inside, which I think is really cool too. So as a feature, so I think it's working from a massing standpoint. I think it definitely has an identity. I think pulling from some of Gil's work is very smart too, because he was able to sort of, in a very simplistic mass and form, pull off something that had very good classic proportions, you know. So it kind of rode the line between a clean modern version of sort of a classic, you know, whether it was a Spanish or whatever it was. I mean, he just really boiled it down to its essence, and I think you're starting to get some of that in your design, borrowing from sort of his aesthetic. So I like that. My only two comments are super minor, and they're more aesthetic driven. You know, I don't think the color change is really effective here because it's too close, like the shades. You have that band. Like, you know, I just kept staring at the printed renderings, you know, and part of, on here they look, and it may just be the print, they look very like reddish beige, you know, and then here they look more yellowish in the model, but the shades are really close. I would have loved to see kind of that bottom, which is the darker thing, go like one shade even more natural or darker, to sort of blend with the hillside a little bit more. And then I kind of wondered why, because you would have had license to do it here. This is probably your first house that doesn't have any stone, like a stone base of any sort. So I was wondering, I mean, I'm sure that was
Good
just
choice,
a
by the way.
choice. But I mean,
Gil would not have liked that.
it would have worked here, like on that, especially on that single form. But in lieu of that, you know, I'm not pushing that you introduce that, but I just was curious that it didn't find its way here. But I think there needs to be a little more contrast between the two shades of stucco that you're doing. Otherwise, I think you're gonna find, because this is south and sort of east, southeast, the west is pretty protected, you know, as the hill rises, but you're gonna get a lot of sun on this, so you're not gonna, those two shades are gonna almost appear pretty close to identical when they're just blasted with sort of daylight. So you may want to look at darkening the darker one. I wouldn't lighten the lighter one, but I think you need a little more contrast there. So, but that's, again, a minor aesthetic comment. I think overall, structurally, this is working, and I think it's very nice and a clever sort of reinterpretation. So I can support it.
So I took the drawings and walked all over the lot and hill, and I really like the garage configuration. You broke up that giant door that just shouted, and just by offsetting them and making them smaller, made it less, made a much more subtler statement. And also you subdued the entry level door. It's approachable. It doesn't try to shout. Just as it's a door, but it's welcoming. I have no problems with the 5-foot setback. I think by the time I think because of the grade between the lots, we're not going to have two buildings up tight next to each other. I'm also glad you replaced the mailbox and utility area on the front and connected it all and made that separate from the house, because the last time you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began, and it really interfered with the look of your entire project. So I'm happy with that. I applaud you for figuring out how to get the building to rise up and follow the contour of the land. I think that's great. I think the courtyard is clever. I think it's really good. You don't have to put any kind of roofing material to cover it, so you've actually eliminated a whole section of roof. But also you made something interesting for the for the house, you know, so, and kudos to you for deciding to move the retaining wall. I mean, I'm sure that's was not a cheap decision, but it also gave you a little more wiggle room, so and you used it well, so I can make all the findings.
I think you've done a great job of softening that front corner. I think that the roof is so much better. I am significantly less enamored with the west elevation. It's just a great big box still in the front. I think the articulation that you did on the two garage doors is fantastic. If you look at that design of the second story and think of it as an L, I think a T would have been the appropriate version. Pushing that whole front of the second story back and using all of that room that you have that's currently backyard, just pushing that whole structure back so that you get a step on the entire front instead of just the corner front.
Like over the garage part, that part goes
Yeah,
back?
the part that's over the
Mm-hmm.
garage. Instead of that being kind of an L, I would have pushed it back and made it a T, so that there's a step on both sides. I really don't like that west elevation at all. I know that there's a berm and that the elevations of the two lots are different, but it just really is a big wall from there.
Yeah.
And so I am not in love with that. The way that you followed the natural step up in those front steps is great. Softening the landscaping is great. And I don't know that I'd stop the project for it, but it doesn't feel like we made any progress at all on that west.
By west, you mean the side next to lot 8?
The side that's shared, and I don't have a problem with the setback. It's not the setback at that lower level. It's really, there's just a ginormous 2-story wall that just takes up that whole west side.
It may not be as noticeable or as evident when the next house is sitting up higher than it, too.
That's true.
We're
May
just-
not be as
we're just-
noticeable if you push the whole top back either.
Yeah, I know, but we shouldn't be redesigning everything, but I guess we're all, I'm sorry, I
No.
butted in. Are you finished?
Yeah.
Oh,
That-
okay.
That was all, but I really appreciate the responsiveness to the comments from the commission. I mean, answered the vast majority of them, and so thank you for really listening.
But there are some things we could potentially request on that to because if you notice on the elevation, I don't know if it's in the model, but that piece that comes out closest to that 5 foot or is 5 feet, there's a banding there, you know, below the windows. You know, I granted there's no windows below it, but the banding stops. So on the sides, it's the garage. It's just the same stucco all the way up. If
You're
we,
saying continue the
if we
banding around?
continue
Continue the
that
banding,
and
that
then
might
you
help
had
soften
more
it.
contrast between the two things, that would help at least visually create like two distinct levels. You
Yeah.
know? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
agree.
it would help.
Anything to soften that, I think,
That might-
is an improvement. It's my opinion. I can make the findings. I don't feel like it made it much progress on that side.
Yeah, I don't think that Irvin Gill would be mad at you at all about this, so I'm not gonna try to redesign anything. I just, the only real design comment that I have is, Gill, when early in his career, when he was working with the old man Hubbard, they did try some things out here that were their starting point was ripping off Frank Lloyd Wright, and that's why it's called Gill's Prairie stuff. And then of course the high point of his career is when he just got into extremely clean boxes. Almost got that. The main quibble that Gil would have with this, I think, is just that these eaves don't. If you look real carefully at their prairie houses, there's like very generous 3-foot eaves, and these are a little clipped in comparison. But it's all right. I think it's an extremely credible job, and I wouldn't mess with it. I would say that in terms of Commissioner Desai's comment about the contrast, that the proper way to handle that will be during construction to do some trial samples, like 2 or 3 foot square patches of stucco in different colors, a couple of contrasting things, because we always are at risk in bright sunlight here to have those things wash out. So I think that seeing it on a shady and a sunny elevation, do 2 or 3 different samples that would and make that decision during construction, that would be the right way to handle it. Just a couple of more comments here. Everybody seems to be pretty comfortable with the idea of that 5-foot setback, and I'll go along with that. The retaining wall down in front, I'm really glad that you did that, and that you're wiping out those little concrete block boxes that were built around different utility things. I know the site developer just had to do that, but they're egregious. They're just really ugly little things sitting in the landscape. They are. They really. I mean, if you just look at trying to maintain, the natural flow of the land and so forth, those things are just stupid sitting there, like that. So I hope that this is a pattern that other designers will pick up on, to try to do something with those. What? You making?
Do you think that those mailboxes will be there forever, or they're going to get their mail delivered to the front door, and eventually that big box of mailboxes will go away?
They'll continue to be there. It's probably part of the agreement.
Good question.
Because I think I agree with you. They disrupt the flow of whatever's happening around it. So
They're really stupid looking.
it wouldn't be my choice.
Yeah, so I really hope that this becomes a pattern up there of different architects finding ways to do that sort of thing and wipe out those dumb concrete block things. One last comment that I have. One of the findings, I don't remember which one, somewhere back in there, said that there needed to be a finding about how it was going to be a safety issue, that we were going to work with the natural grade. I don't remember exactly how it was stated, and that.
In the findings in the staff report?
Yeah,
The full-
we should just take that one out of there, okay? I could not make that finding, but I think that it's a very irrelevant kind of thing, and the reason is that even though the finished house is going to look very much like grade, if you look at the sections, there's going to be a lot of excavation and a lot of shoring and so forth in order to accomplish what they want to do. So it's not going to, safety is not going to be a matter of working gently with the shape of the land, because they're going to have to dig way down into it, and that's really a building and safety issue, not ours. But it's a finding. Leave it in if you want. I don't care. But it's a finding that was not right to be stated to begin with. So. I couldn't make it, but
You're talking about A, under the hillside, this one, this is right, Joe? Minimum grading.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of work, but that's, that's the contractor and that's the engineering, and it's not gonna be the most dangerous thing that was ever.
We can't take the finding out. I mean, we have to make the finding in order to approve the project. So if you don't think the discussion of the finding is accurate, we can revise that. But we have to make the finding to approve the project.
I would not want to hold this up. I think we're headed toward an approval, and I would not want to hold it up because I feel like it's a language technicality more than anything else here.
Okay. But you just do you want to just soften the language a little bit, or?
Do you have it up there?
Objective 13, L13, I think you're talking about, the hazards and minimizing the amount of grading under A.
Hillside development permit finding A, objective L13, ensure the hazards are minimized in the hillside.
I think really there, the issue is not so much that there's not any grading or anything, it's just that you don't create big cliffs that people could fall off, and I don't see anything like that here.
No, there definitely is. There definitely
I think
is
he's
not.
talking about the natural moving extra natural vegetation, but we're stuck with this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, the grading is what the grading is, that ship has sailed, right, so.
That's right. Okay, well, you just got me to look at it differently because you said it has to do with what the finished forms are.
Yeah.
Okay, and if everything else during construction is not included as part of that.
Well, obviously, as you said, that will have to comply with building code and the safety measures incumbent in building
Right.
code.
Oh, okay, so I'll just, you could just strike what I just said if you want, and I'll let it go.
Okay.
Well, I haven't heard anybody anthropomorphize a block wall with mailboxes, but that's interesting. I like that. But I agree with you, but that's a difference of an architect's view of a wall and just a contractor. You tell some guy, hey, I just want to put a block, a retaining wall here. Better wait, and then you show up and you go, oh, maybe, weren't you going to curve it more to match the hillside? Well, you just put a retaining wall, you just cut it through here, right? So that's
You always have to watch out for that word just.
Because that looks totally different, you're right, than what belies the photograph. So if it looks like that, we'll all be happy. No, I think I can make the findings. I just always find it interesting that objective L14, we always run against this. It's always one of the objectives, and you pointed it out in the last project where it wasn't quite obvious. We're looking up at this grand wall and then that giant sort of porte cochere that just you're sort of stuck with because they have by right the ability to do certain things, but some things just don't look quite right. And I think this project has mitigated as much as possible, and pushing it back, the vegetation's gonna make it blend in. But by right, they have the right to be there, and I think we've done as much as we're sort of allowed to, and they've made all the changes that we requested. Well, I like the design. I'm not, like I said, I'm not too concerned about like that front porch that Tom was talking about. If you'd put a back porch with a covered awning and someone could sit out there, maybe that would be aesthetically give it more cut back into the hillside. But I think over time, there's gonna be another house up there and they're gonna have the same rights. And overall, I think, we'll be making the same similar kind of findings, and eventually we'll have a village in the foothills.
Yeah.
So I can make the findings.
Yeah, I concur. I think that the fundamental issue is the massing and the locations of the massing, and that works. And everything else we can tweak and work with. I'm sympathetic to Tom's concern about the west wall, and I think that the additional banding and perhaps color variation would be helpful there. And I do think if you wanted to consider doing a little bit bigger eaves, that would help sort of horizontalize that as well, as Joe was saying. One part I'm a little less happy with is right on the corner here. I mean, I like the massing and the shaping, but it just seems like a dead corner that when you first come in, when you first see, and I realize the idea is you want to sort of turn the corner and make the front onto the terrace, the Nathaniel Terrace. But I don't know, I was hoping something there that would be a little less, I'm not architect lingoese, but it just seems sort of flat and dead.
right in that corner, and the corner is right where you see. And the fact that it's it's a one-story mass is great. And clearly, when you get into the courtyard, it's really cool. I love the courtyard. I agree with everyone on that. And I also love the steps that move up with the land, because that gives you the idea of the whole stepping concept. I just sort of wish there was some way that could be incorporated on what looks like just sort of a boring corner. And, maybe it'll be hidden with plants, and so it won't. But it seems a bit of a missed opportunity to do something that's sort of, I don't know, welcoming instead of just hidden.
Yeah, the medium height bushes, the vegetation that's up there right now, I think would give it a much different look. That almost looks like lawn.
Yeah. Well,
right
there is a
now.
lawn on the Nathaniel Terrace concept side, a little one there.
I
Below
think-
that would be an infiltration basin.
And so you can't really do much there. I mean, it's not a showstopper for me. Was there any thought of putting the walkway to the corner as opposed to the terrace?
If I may.
Yeah.
We thought it would be safer to do it on that side and keep it away from the corner, and also makes kind of a nice progression into the front entry. So we did move it there. We thought it was a better experience than coming from the driveway, so we were able to bring it out to Nathaniel. So we did look at it that way. And if I could, just to address the comment you had about the corner, if you look at our landscape, there actually is landscaping elements, some small bushes that will soften that corner. So in reality, what you're seeing is the bare building. But
Right,
once-
right.
We do have our photo montage starts to show the landscape elements, and that does soften that corner. And once everything goes in, I think that won't be as much of an issue in reality.
Fair enough. Okay.
I figured they moved it around the corner because they had all the utility stuff that
Yeah.
was right at that corner. And if people are gonna check if everyone who lives there is gonna stop there every day to get their mail, then if I were me, I'd want my entryway to be somewhat
Yeah.
distant from them.
Yeah.
It's safer. I mean, when you think about the fact that guests who can't park in the driveway, they're going to park right along the street, right there, and so actually where that lands at the curb is a very convenient place. Besides being in line with the front door, so I think that'll be okay.
Okay.
So do we have some conditions, or are we?
I think, well, I'll just make a motion. How about that?
Please do.
I move that we approve Hillside Development Permit 15-20, Conditional Use Permit 15-21, and Minor Conditional Use Permit 20-01 pursuant to Resolution 20-02, with the added condition of approval of banding on the west wall being carried all the way around, and the contrast be continued on that wall as well,
And study the contrast.
And study the contract.
and a contrast study.
Okay. We've got a motion.
I'll second it.
We've got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look, we saved you three hearings.
Call express service.
That's right.
I'll definitely mention that to the state.
So the next one, we can go to 7, right?
Yeah.
Put a comment box outside there.
It's round.
Yeah.
As a lid?
Jeez.
So if we have a moment to queue up the next presentation.
Okay, do people need a break, or do we want to just go through?
We go for it.
Okay, let's have a 3-minute break then.
You gotta get
We
some
can queue
water.
stuff up and hit a bathroom right quick. reconvene from our break and go on to Design Review Permit 1906, which is public hearing number 2. Do we have a staff presentation?
We have a staff presentation beginning with a PowerPoint, and Associate Planner Clara Lynn will be giving that presentation.
Good evening, chairs and commissioners. Planning Commission this evening will be reviewing a design review permit for the property located at 1910 Santa Anita Avenue. The applicant is requesting Planning Commission to consider a design review permit application to demolish the existing single-family residence to accommodate a new 3,462 square foot, two-story single-family residence with an attached two-car garage. Pursuant to the municipal code, design review permit is required to allow a new construction proposed to include a second story, and it is required for any new construction with a gross floor area over 3,000 square feet in a single-family zoned lot area from 7,500 square feet to 11,000 square feet. Here is the vicinity map showing the property is outlined in red. It is located at the east side of Santa Anita Avenue and north of Grandview Avenue, where the city boundary is bordering City of Arcadia. The lot is a 10,855 square foot lot in the R1 residential zone, and all the property adjacent to the lot are also zone R1. Here are the photographs provided by the applicant of the existing structure on the property that was built in 1952. Since the property is less than 75 of age, it is not subject to the discretionary demolition permit and the historic resource evaluation report requirement. Here are the street view of the west elevation and a street view from the southwest corner. Applicant has prepared a neighborhood analysis based on 41 property that was noticed within the 300-foot radius. The average the average neighboring home size is 2,280 square feet. The top 1/3 is 2,913. The proposed project is exceeding the top 1/3 by 127 square feet. The proposed project is a code-compliant project. It meets all the requirements within the code required as to lot coverage, building height, gross floor area, setbacks, and parking requirement. As for the front yard setback, the applicant has prepared a setback analysis to determine the prevailing front yard setback. And it is determined that the average on the linear block is 35 feet. The site survey on the right showing the existing footprint of the structure, and also there is 6 existing trees on the lot, including a coast live oak near the rear property line. So here are photos of the coast live oak.
Can we go back one slide? The prevailing setback is basically just the two houses adjacent, right? Because the one on the corner doesn't count because it's on the corner,
That's correct.
It's probably on the other street.
but it is a lot closer to Santa Anita than the others. So I mean, if you added that one in, the setback would be a lot.
A lot
Shorter.
less, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So here are the existing condition of the coast live oak that is near the rear property line. So for this oak tree, the applicant has prepared a comprehensive arborist report to protect and to assess the viability of the new proposed structure in relationship to this oak tree. The oak tree is located approximately 22 feet from the margin of the oak trunk, and the arborist report has identified a tree protection zone to protect the oak tree from damaging from equipment, parking, and store tools and washing equipment within the tree protected zone, and to avoid cutting tree roots whenever it's possible. Here is the conceptual landscape plan showing the tree protection fencing at the rear yard. And it also will be complying with the low impact development plan by proposing a infiltration basin at the front yard. The proposed site plan showing a L-shaped lot with one room deep configuration. The front yard is 35 and the rear yard is 15 feet 8 inches. Here are the floor plan. The first floor has a living room, dining room, kitchen, laundry, powder, bedroom suite, and attached two-car garage, and also an elevator leading up to the second floor. And the second floor has 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and 2-bathroom.
It also has a open porch
It has an open porch in the front
in
yard.
the front and it's like 200 square feet, but that counts for the total square footage. No?
No,
Even
it's
though it's under, but it's under,
Solid cover?
solid.
It's solid cover front porches that face the street are excluded from the gross floor area calculation.
interesting.
But if it's off the back, it is included for the side.
Hmm.
Here is the elevation of the west elevation is the street facing elevation, showing the characteristics of a ranch style architecture with a asymmetric facade and a covered porch that is sheltered from the low pitch roof. And the east elevation is the rear elevation, showing multiple expanse of windows. Here are the north elevation and the south elevation. On the north elevation, it shows the proposed solar system the panel locations. Here are the 3D rendering perspective from the street view from the northwest and from the southwest. It shows the single-story element that will be wrapped around the front and the south elevation, and the 2-story elements towards the north. Here are the views from the rear yard. And this is a 3D rendering of the front facade. This is the street panorama of the existing structure and a photo montage of the proposed street elevation. Materials that will be used for the proposed project are the concrete roof tile in slate color. The exterior will be finished with sand stucco finish and fiber-clad windows with wood casing and stone veneers and hardy board wood siding. Design review permit finding has to be made in order to approve the project. Here are the summaries: that the property will continue to be used as single-family residence and it's consistent with the low-density general plan destination and zoning code. The proposed project complies with setback height, lot coverage, and floor area requirements. It is compatible with bulk mass scale and siting of the existing neighborhood, and it will not unreasonably interfere with the use, possession, and enjoyment of the surrounding properties. The proposed home will not interfere with public view as it preserve all the existing trees on site. The proposed ranch architectural style is not ill-proportioned or detract from the foothill village setting. The proposed project is thoughtful ranch architectural style that is responsive to the site as it placed the two-story element on the north portion of the lot, and a single-story element wraps around the front and the south elevation. The siding of the structure is in keeping with the landform and maximize the open space. The project will be constructed with high-quality materials of wood railings, partial width front porch, horizontal siding, stacked stone, and finished with fiberglass windows and with wood casing. The project will be compliant to the water efficient landscape ordinance and also compliant to the low impact development ordinance. Alternative before the commission this evening is to approve the project with modification, deny the project request and citing the reasons for finding for denial, or continue the project and provide directions to staff and applicant. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission to approve the design review permit 1906 pursuant to the resolution 2001 with the attached conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. The applicant is here to answer any questions you might have, and I'll be answering any question you might have for staff.
All right, do we have any questions for staff?
One,
Yep.
like, plan question I don't understand. On the ground floor, are there 2 fireplaces? Or there's 2 build-outs? Is that correct, or is that on the front in that great room, living room? Is it 2?
One into the porch and one off to the south?
Yeah, or is that one existing? Well, this is all new, right? So. What are those 2 boxes?
Can we have the architect answer that?
Hi, good evening, commissioners. My name is Philip Chan. I'm the designer of the property, and the homeowner is here present tonight. I've worked on the design with the homeowner for a long time, and those 2 pop-outs are actually fireplace. One is actually a heat fireplace. The other one is a little small fire feature. So they're both fireplace. But we don't want to have 2 chimneys because it will make the front facade a little bit too busy. So we decided to just keep one of the chimney going up.
You can only do those gas fireplaces.
Yes, gas
Don't
fireplace.
even require chimneys anymore,
So they're both-
you're home free.
Yeah. So we could technically
Even
take out
both
the
of them?
chimney. Yeah. Or we can take out the chimney if that's a concern.
But you're
the-
using the chimney. That's. I mean, you're. There's
One of
gonna be
them is
one
a-
fireplace that
Correct.
vents out.
Correct.
And the other one.
The one is just vent.
Sidewalls.
Yeah, vent to the sidewall. They are both gas burning fireplace. So if
There's 2 fireplaces in that room.
correct. Yeah. I know it's a little bit weird, but that's what the homeowner wants.
So the one on the south side just vents to the outside directly out, no, not up?
Correct. So if you look at the front elevation, I only have 1 chimney in the middle of the house.
Yeah.
Because having 2 will look weird, and having none does not look as nice. So we decided to keep just 1 chimney going up.
But it terminates well below the top of the second story anyway.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, did you want to make a presentation or the applicant make a presentation?
Yeah, I want to thank staff for making the presentation. Few things I want to add is we decided to stick with the ranch style inspiration design because we felt that it will match with a lot of the existing home on Santa Anita. With using design feature like a very shallow roof pitch, really simplistic in design and details. So overall, we really believe the design of the direction of the home we're moving, hopefully we're moving towards the right direction. So yeah, if there's any question, homeowner and I can answer, we'll be happy to address.
Are the eaves, you've got your, your rake and eave boards, are they planned to be white?
The fascia board, we did not specify on plan, but usually we would like to keep it white. Oh, actually, we did we did call it out on number 11, white. Yeah. Another thing I want to add to the presentation is we decided to put the second floor mass towards the north because of the descending slope, the natural slope of the property. And we do realize that the neighboring home to the south is one-story home, so we try to push the second floor mass as close to the north side as much as possible. So there is about 44 foot of a setback between the second floor to the property line. And the front setback is 35 foot from the property line, but if you add the two adjacent property, the one on the north is 31 feet 9 inches and the south is 30 feet 9 inches. So the average would be about 31 foot. So we exceed the average by a little bit.
Are you keeping that semicircular driveway?
No, that is to be removed. The homeowner did thought long and hard because it does provide ease of backup space. But he's fine with just one singular driveway because he want to provide more landscape and more greenery.
But the, you mentioned on the setbacks, the two houses adjacent to you, but the 2 to the north is a lot closer to the road, right?
Correct. And the property to the north, it's about 7 foot higher than the pad of our property. So although it's a 2-story home, our second floor will not be significantly higher.
Right.
It's pretty even.
Yeah.
But to that point, is there an existing retaining wall on the property line?
Correct.
And is that yours or is it the neighbor's?
Based on the survey,
north.
which we have on the second page on A 1.1, it's pretty much, it goes in and out. So in any case, the neighboring property want to preserve the existing wall, we can always work around it. But we do have a grading plan already provided.
Where is that grading plan?
It's on conceptual grading plan CG-2.
Where's that?
It's page
CG-2,
All the way to the bottom.
Yeah. So if any walls that needs to be repaired, we would repair it. If the neighbor object to any of the our proposal to the existing wall, we'll simply just build a new one because there aren't enough setback between the property line and the home.
You've increased the setback, right? Because the garage used to be there.
Yes, correct. So once we remove the garage, there would be plenty of space. So on the grading plan, it shows the existing house and also our proposed home. So you can look in relationship of both.
Does it show the
does it show the indentation of the, on the, on the front picture, you show the small retaining wall and the fence goes in, and I assume that the property retaining wall is behind that, going back? Is that what you mean by going in and out?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's gonna be a new wall, that driveway, front yard?
Yeah.
And cutting in? Okay.
Have you, you mentioned, the neighbor and the wall. Have you had other interactions with the neighbors?
No.
No, okay, so,
But I did advise the homeowner to speak to some of his neighbors, but I'm not sure, I haven't got any feedback from him, so.
okay.
Your lot is significantly higher than the one to the south. The grade in between is,
The same as the.
Yeah, each one steps up.
steps up a
7
lot,
feet,
though.
or maybe more.
About 6.5.
Yeah, about the same.
Hence, even on the first floor, we provided a deeper setback. So if you look on A1, even the first story home, we step back a lot. And in addition, if you look on our A1, the existing house goes further back. So we're actually taking out some of the mass and relocating it elsewhere on the property. So I think the neighboring home should benefit a little bit in that sense.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the commission on this application? Any neighbors, perhaps? Okay. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back for deliberation. You want to start us off, Bob?
Well, you answered my question about the porch. The project is gonna look like all the other houses on Santa Anita without a problem. It'll fit in. The fact that that the existing garage is gonna go away will improve the setbacks. A porch that on that right-hand side that goes into the foyer, but a porch that looks out on Santa Anita, I don't know how, it's there for aesthetic reasons. I'm not sure people would want to sit out there and watch the cars go up and down Santa Anita. It's not a very peaceful street.
Well, when I went up and looked, there was 9 deer on the center median, so I don't know, maybe you might want to
Yeah,
hang out
you
and
see the deer?
look at those.
The lots are so offset that the massing on the north end and to the back, I think is a good choice. I'm not real warm about the garage door. It kind of is a huge statement, but it's the style, the architectural style. I'd like to see that maybe broken up or made into something less impressive. But other than that, I can make the findings.
I want to send this back. It should be continued, because basically I think that the massing of the house and everything, if you study the site, the house massing, I think it fits in very, very well. If I go to the conceptual grading plan, it's not. No, you're blowing smoke at us here, okay? This does not make any technical sense at all, and I just think that it's gonna run into all kinds of problems, things that could happen that we might not wanna have happen if we let this go. This just has to be done competently by a civil engineer. I definitely would not make
Actually,
findings on this.
I got a lot more information out of the arborist report than I did out of some of the other drawings.
It's gotta show in the drawings. It's gotta.
You mean like, specifically like sections?
Well, just follow the grading lines, okay? Just, yeah, they've got the the existing grading lines here, but it doesn't make any sense at all in terms of, you know, if you look at the side of the garage right now, just one for instance.
The existing garage.
The existing garage.
The existing garage, the ground plane, you know, starts up there like a couple of feet below the eave line on the garage, right? And then tapers down to the front. Well, I don't see any modification of grade shown here, but somehow they got driveway that comes right up to that through 5 feet of dirt. Okay, just for instance, the back side. Anybody go around the back?
No, there's a big dog.
He's
Yeah,
plenty
I know.
friendly.
Well, I got the kid who was home to put the dog inside. There's at least 2 feet of drop off between a terrace and the lower lawn in the back. No changes in grade like that are addressed here at all. And how's that going to affect the drip line of the oak tree that's back there? I mean, it's not done. It's not done, okay? So I think that these are very important. These are very important things to the design. By the time you thought it all the way through, what else would have to change here? So, you know, with no further ado, I would like to see this just.
So your thought is that we're effectively not seeing the final design because it's gonna.
We are not seeing a complete application as far as I'm concerned.
I kind of like the design of the house. Listen, compared to what's there, it's going to be a beautiful house. But I do concur because I was looking for more drawings, basically.
Mhm.
So it's like I want to see the backyard. I know it's a demo permit and everything, but like Bob said, I think the house is fine. I think we just need some more details to what the rest of it's going to look like. And if it's, I didn't see the grading thing, but I mean, you don't see anything behind the 2-car garage. And so what's there and how does that line up? Besides that,
Normally what you would see on a plan like this for approval would be that the existing contours as they were surveyed would be solid lines, or dotted if you want, one dotted, the other solid. The modifications to the grading would then be done in the contrasting line. So you would see both, and you would see what's going to be. This is just impossible. This is drawn like it's a flat site.
yeah, I mean, they have some lines on the side, you know, that come in and cut, but you're right, you don't see
No,
you don't
it's
see
just-
the context. So
It's
maybe
just gotta go back to be completed competently. I don't even wanna deal with the rest of it, frankly. Yeah, you could shoot me down, but I would just make a motion right now that we
Well, but
send
if,
it back.
look, here's the thing, if we are gonna continue, you know, to the extent we have any other advice we could give on the design or other issues, you know, we might as well get that out now so that,
Correct,
so
I
that,
get it.
so that they, you know, when it
I'm
goes.
just telling you how I feel about it.
Okay.
It's, you know,
Okay.
it really needs an awful lot of work in this area to be complete. I don't have much problem with the rest of it. I think, you know, I walked around, I looked at it, I said, I think that the design of the house itself makes an awful lot of sense in this particular location. The way the massing sits and the way it works going down the hill with the grading and the other houses to either side of it, it's great, okay? But, this is just terrible.
Other than that, I like the rest. I like the house.
Okay. Tom?
I too like the house. I try to look at it from concern about the second story lording over the house on either side, and the house to the north with the second story is actually only got 2 tiny little windows on that side. So that didn't give me any heartburn. They gave more room back. I think that I will respectfully disagree with Commissioner Spears about the fact that it'll fit right in on that street. I think it's the only well-proportioned two-story house on Santa Anita between there and Foothill.
Between there and Elkins.
Yeah, between two streets, yeah. So I really think it's a fine house. So I guess I don't understand the technical shortfall of the survey or which we won't solve now. So I don't have any objections to actually approving it.
I share some concerns. On the bigger picture, I think the massing and sort of the siting was thoughtfully considered as far as neighbors' properties and sort of the topography there. So I think that as far as the layout of the massing and the masses of the house, first and second story, I think that's working. So I wouldn't change anything there. But I do have some concerns, seeing the site photos of the neighbor's property and the one below, and there's, like 6 or 7 feet grade difference, And one of the telltale signs is when you don't take that into consideration, you get elevations like this, which are very detailed as far as the materials and the house, the architecture, but it has no reference to what's happening at the PLs, right? So where it steps up, and that information's completely missing. And then it kind of goes to what Joe was saying, when we do elevations, we have to consider the existing grade, what's happening across the site. And a lot of times on elevations, what you'll find is you'll show the existing slope, even if it's slight, and then you'll show where the new house finished floor is relative to that, so you can see whether it's a foot lower here, 6 inches lower here,
Right.
what. So, right, this is as if it's drawn on a table, right? So that's
Right. And could I corroborate something here? If you look, in line with what you're saying, the backyard, you see that number 2 with the arrows on it? And you see that curve thing that goes around it? The dashed line, which is grading? Right,
Yep.
right there is a nearly 2-foot change in elevation. It drops off, and the back elevation of the existing house does that by 2 feet, right? And the oak tree is right there, but yet it's drawn flat. So are we going up? Are we going down?
Well, but it says 116 there and 114 on the next line over, so that corroborates your 2-foot difference, right?
Well, in existing grading, but
yeah, but
how it's handled.
here it's
Right.
all on the same level.
Yeah.
how it's
So
handled
that's-
Absolutely.
That's the disconnect.
On the design is what's actually gonna happen with the grade. Yes, you're right, that shows the existing.
I mean, this reeks a little bit of
Not
a
the-
similar project we looked at with an oak tree on, I want to say Bonita, Manzanita,
Mhm.
the blue house,
Yeah.
where there was a lot happening in that small area between the tree and the house. So,
You're attacking your flag, Bob.
so I just think it's not developed yet. I mean, these are conceptual, schematic sort of. I mean, they're good for knowing the proportions of the house, but as far as the house's connection to the land, it's like a soup that's still
Yeah.
cooking. You
Yeah.
know, so we need more information on those relationships. I think one thing that's missing that a site like this would definitely help us see is basically sections, right? So a section, cross sections through part of the neighbor property line that way to kind of see the grade relationships, and even cross and longitudinal sections from the street back to kind of let us know, like, the house pad's here and then it's like 2 feet lower here, or what's happening, relative from the oak tree to the street, So some sections cut through there would help us sort of understand what's happening on the site. I always, when we draw these, we don't draw as if the house is sitting in the middle on these elevations. We always draw the elevation what what's the elevation contour doing at the setback, where the house meets the setback? And that's what we draw on each cardinal elevation, so that you can see the relationship between finished floor slab. I'm sure this is slab on grade, so that relative to the contour. So that's missing. I think massing wise, it's fine. I have some concern, and this is probably really delicate or minor, is just the material palette. I don't have any issues with the materials themselves, but overall, and it may be a rendering thing, I don't know, but very bright. Like the house, you know, is very white, you know, and
Pure white is blinding out
and
here.
something to think about, you can design this in a vacuum in your office on the computer, you know, and you got a dark screen and it looks great, but you have to consider, like, this is west and south because it's up on a plinth from the property below. So
Right.
that whole side to the front, you're gonna get a lot of daylight, like a lot of light. So like you may want to consider, you know, color tones are your friend in this case, because it actually helps the house ground it into the site, especially when you're on a tabletop that's doing this down the street. You know, I'm not going to say color, but like a darker tone helps to seat the house. And that's kind of why I asked about the fascia too, because it sounds silly. You know, in the rendering, the underside, if you looked at the rendering, is black, right? And that's just because it's in shade. But the fascia is white. So it actually, you want to kind of flip that. So I think you may want to look at your color palette, you know. I'm not saying you don't have to have white. That's totally fine, you know. And sort of these ranch, modern farmhouse kind of things, that's kind of where they want to live. But consider the makeup of that, because you're going to get, it's going to look fine in your rendering, but in real life, things going to glow, you know. So that's why I asked about that. Curious use of some of the materials too, like your stone. Like, I appreciate that material, but you've stuck it under the porch and it wraps around the side yard, like, and that's like a premium material, if you want to call it that stone veneer. I know you don't like it, but the idea is, like, you don't even see it from the front because it's like 5 feet back under a covered porch, whereas it would have been more interesting to use it like on that rec room piece or something. I know there's a banding on it, but it is, you know, I always if I can convince clients to spend money on premium materials, you know, and we can't have miles of it, like, we're going to try to use it where we get our most bang for our buck visually, you know. And so, you know, that was, I don't know who made that comment about the garage, but, you know, that might be a better use of that to kind of seat that thing back, you know, so it's not like a bright white door and thing, but maybe it's
That would help.
clad in the veneer, you know.
That garage door jumped out.
I just thought that was a curious use, because, like, no one's going to see that stone except from the chimney part above the roof, you know, and so.
Yeah, and you know,
gotta give that some thought. I just.
if you look, go to the northwest corner of the garage, talking about the materials,
Yeah.
and you see there's a line that just that squiggles toward the street, a solid line, and it just looks like the edge of a driveway there. However, where that hits the corner of the garage, that's a 5 foot tall retaining wall, according to you know, if you really start to analyze this, and so, you know, we're talking about materials on the house, but you've got some big site elements like that, and what are those? What are
Right,
those
how do those
materials
work?
gonna
I
be?
think, you know, my take is that I think the fundamental layout, siting, massing of the house is good. And that's where you start. And so we oftentimes have people come in where they mess that up. And then you can't fix that by banding or putting fake rock or any of that. It just doesn't work. So the good news is we're starting in the right place. And I think it seems as though a lot of these houses and these lots are sort of, you know,
not all that unique because they sort of step up or whatever, but they do have a big change in elevation, and you do have a lot of site issues that you don't have just on plain flat land. And so I think the way that you've incorporated the massing on the north and the second story in the back, it really helps. It really is the right choice.
It's a good job.
And so I'm going to start tweaking now, but I don't want it to sound negative because I think fundamentally the main thing is good. I think that the garage piece gave me heartburn. At first I thought when I looked at the plans that you've switched from a side garage to a front-facing garage, and that's bad. But as you drive up Santa Anita, that probably is actually helpful because that side-facing garage is sort of prominent. I think the prevailing setback is inequitable in this case, and it does you no good. I really think if we included that third house, I'm sure the prevailing setback would be less than 30 feet, close to 25 maybe. If the sort of first story element of the house near the garage was popped out another 5 feet and the garage stayed where it is, it would really minimize the bluntness of that garage. And then as you develop the plans and we get a better understanding of the interaction with the neighbors, you might want to pull some of the other space in. I don't know. But if you move that bit up, you can pull some of that massing forward. That will also make more of a one-story element separation from the two-story. And I think that will really help with de-emphasizing the garage. So I would like to see that. I'd like us to recalculate that prevailing setback, including that other one, and then I think if you brought a bit of that space forward, it would help the layout. No surprise to anybody here. I hate the rock. The thing about it is it's not the natural stone from this area, right? So we have big field stone, which I don't know that works on a ranch house, but you could do brick, right? That's a much more traditional element. And if you want to do stone, go ahead. But I think that Manish is right. It's sort of going to get lost to where it's at. And when you get close to it and you look at it, you're going to say, this doesn't belong here. This is not from where we are. And so I would think of something to go there that's a little bit more traditional for a ranch style and or more in keeping with the location, the locale, as opposed to a rock that comes from God knows where they quarry that stuff. And then some of the color issues, I'll defer to the experts, but I think that
I want to agree with you on that stone. I mean, it's all cultured stuff to begin with, but it's promoted by a couple of big companies. It's become popular. But it's used all over the country, as far as I know, or at least in large parts of it. This mortarless stuff. There's a house I go by almost every day that has a great big chimney that's all mortarless. That's kind of scary if you think about what it really means. But you're absolutely correct. It's a completely alien element to our landscape here, and in river rock, brick, which is a man-made thing, which we do have enough of here. They would all be much better choices. We've got beautiful retaining walls around here, some really big ones that are made out of river rock. And
right. No, and I'm not saying it has to be river rock either. I just think that as alien, that's a good word. It doesn't really fit in. And I do think that it would be good to see how the retaining walls finish with the elevation, and then how we're going to treat those. Because if you heard the prior public hearing, we're talking about replacing some just god-awful CMU things with good-looking walls, and it's going to make a big difference. And so how that stuff is finished, I think, is really important as well.
I just remembered a question I have for staff. That back retaining wall on the Arcadia border, it's crumbling. is that something that needs to be looked at as part of this process, and is that included by city, or who makes a determination as to the viability of that back wall? Because if they're gonna be running even as small as Bobcats,
I think the city will take a look at that. Certainly, if the wall is not going to be able to support the retention of soil that's there presently, I believe that should be addressed in plan check.
okay, because they even have a picture in the arborist report of
It's falling apart.
it falling
Right.
apart.
Yeah, the arborist report, I got a lot of information out of it.
Yeah, I think the arborist report was really,
I
really useful.
bring him back. He did a great job.
Although I still sort of take umbrage to the thing where we describe oaks with uneven canopies as somehow detrimental. I mean, that's the whole point of those things, is they're weird and strange and unique, and I think that's fun, as opposed to, having a perfectly manicured oak tree.
Western trees do not look like lollipops.
Right. Well, they do if you shear them, and you see those on some street trees, but that's not what this is supposed to be.
I think on this, just to add, the grading plan, CG2, this is a pet peeve of mine, but this is a full sheet. Make the thing bigger. Like, make the plan bigger so that.
So you can see it. I mean, what a wild
Oh, yeah, how
concept.
about
In my
that?
old age, I can't see, but
Uh-huh.
like, that plan, well.
It could be 1.5 times the size.
Well, given the information that you're looking for, it's at not a micro, but zoomed in, right? So make sure CG2 is at a bigger scale than 1 to 10. You can go, gosh, I don't know what you can do, but at least 1/8 at a very minimum, like a little bigger would help.
If you save a tree, it'll be as big as you want it.
I just need it bigger.
Yeah, I agree. It's, would 1 in 5
I have
fit?
a personal, anyway. I get things like this from consultants where they take 12 sheets and they just put like one little box of text, and that's one sheet, and I'm like,
You could almost fit 5 foot in there
but
as a
anyway,
scale.
we need that bigger because that's going to be pertinent to
We need to move on.
Your request.
your request,
Okay.
and then
All right,
sections.
So, do we need to make a motion here?
Well, I think we need to talk to the applicant about what your preference is. I think you've heard from us what our thoughts are. Would you like us to continue this?
Yeah, first off, I think I need to fire the civil engineer and congratulate the arborist. I want to thank everybody for your comments. They're all really good comments. Go to public hearing all the time, and honestly, these are really all good comments. I'm happy to hear that we are moving on the right direction. So with all these notes in mind, I'll be happy to sit down with the homeowner and work out all these details and
Okay.
comments tonight.
Would you like us to continue to a date certain or take it off calendar, depending on
It'll
what
be
you're...
hard to say because I'm pretty sure the homeowner might want to, but a lot of details we might need to work it out because it is his home after all.
Well, we could put...
So if we continue to a date certain, we can certainly identify a date further out in the future. If we don't continue it to a date certain, then we have to renotice the project.
Yes.
Let's continue to a date. If the homeowner wants more time to think through about these designs, are we allowed?
We can continue.
We can continue, yeah.
So right now, we're looking at possibly, if you want a little bit more time, April 2nd, or the meeting before March 19th.
I think April 2nd is good. March 19th? Okay. March 19th?
March 19th?
Yes.
Okay.
As much as I was sounding as though the deficiencies in the grading plan were so egregious, looking at this, I'm pretty confident that it's not going to take that long to resolve.
I'll provide more details on it.
Yeah, it can be worked out. It's not a trick bag here. It just really seriously needs to be worked out. But I don't think, you know, my own estimation is that you shouldn't have any time problems getting this done with the dates you're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion then to continue to March 19th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we will move on to Planning Commission reports. Any planning commissioners have any reports?
I don't have anything.
Sounds like we have none. Next is staff reports.
So just wanted to let you know that for our next meeting on March 5th, it looks like we're having a certificate of appropriateness and some discussion about accessory dwelling unit ordinance update and development standards. So we'll begin with a discussion to amend the ordinance.
And
Okay.
part 3 of the continuing saga.
Well, did we get comments back from, we submitted ours, right?
We've submitted from HCD, we submitted to HCD. We haven't received any comments. To my knowledge, HCD hasn't issued any comments to any cities yet. They haven't even published the guidelines yet for implementing the ADU ordinances. So we suspect it will be some time until they do that, because I imagine they're very behind, because all the cities in the state are submitting their ADU ordinances at the same time. We're probably first in line because we did it so quickly.
Oh, really?
But, or earlier in the line, but I
But
imagine
that
they're-
means that there's a 60-day, right? Was there a 60-day?
no, there's no,
Such thing.
the deadline was on us to submit to them within 60 days, and there's no deadline
This
for
is
them to
getting
submit
us
to
more
us.
housing.
And they don't even have to submit anything to us. If they don't disagree with anything in the ordinance, they don't have to provide any comments.
Oh,
But do they
To the
tell
extent-
us they have no comments? Or do we just guess?
that would be a comment.
Technically a comment.
Well, I will have to call them anyway to follow up on other things, so.
But does I mean, while they're reviewing, our ordinance still is operative. If somebody wants to build an ADU, they just follow the ordinance. Is that right? Or we don't say it's under review, so we're holding it up.
Correct,
Okay.
right.
So it's in place.
It's in place.
And if we didn't have it in place, then just the state version would govern.
Correct.
So
And ours tracks
the
the state version to a T almost, so.
So it's pretty much.
So then, on our next meeting, we're gonna talk about further revisions to that, or?
Are we going to be ready for that?
I think so, yeah. We're gonna explore some design standards. So if this isn't discretionary, remember, so this is just design standards, so we control what they look like. We're also going to ideally clean up some of the language. And, you know, just produce a better ordinance.
So that's just with regard to the ADUs and JDUs?
Just ADUs and JADUs,
Okay.
correct?
Great. Okay,
No further comments?
okay, great. Well, with that, we will.
Actually,
Oh, yeah?
did we hear back from city council about joint meeting?
Not yet. The city manager just returned, and he's going to be having his one-on-one discussions with them.
Okay. Great. With that, we will adjourn until our March 5th meeting.